Hey you guys, welcome back. It is time for another monthly update. New York City has been so hot lately. My grow space has been between 85 and 95 degrees every single day. And when it hits 80 degrees outside, my orchids are 85 degrees because the lights are hitting them pretty intensely. So I'm feeding them very heavily. I'm giving them fertilizer of 300 parts per million. I'm feeding kelp. I'm giving them MSU fertilizer. So that's all in with my tap water. So they're getting about 300 parts per million. Sometimes I go over, and that's no big deal. They need to be fed. I have to water them every other day. Some orchids I have to water every single day, the ones that I have in clay pots, but everything's doing really well. It seems like every day I have a new orchid in bloom, which has been really nice. All of my oncidiums have been spiking, so I'm happy to see a few that I haven't seen spike for me in a while. Just now that I've been taking better care of all of my orchids, everything's going really well. And when I say taking better care of my orchids, I mean the orchids that I've had for a really long time that were not well taken care of before I started caring a lot. So everything's thriving. Lots of cattleyas are in bud right now. All of the oncidiums are spiking. I'm going to be downsizing my collection a little bit, so I'm getting rid of some of my larger oncidium type orchids that just take up way too much space. I'm also going to be giving away things that don't thrive as well for me, so I'm going to be getting rid of my Miltonia, which I'm looking at it right now. She's struggling with my summer. I'd love to grow her, but I think it's just really my climate that's not conducive to her growing. She wants to be in a cloud forest somewhere, so she's going to a better grower with better conditions. So I'm going to be sending that off. And I'll be making room for more orchids. So I'm downsizing, but I'm going to be going to the Tamiami Orchid Festival in October. So I'm hoping to get a couple of new species and cattleyas, more of the compact type orchids. So I'm going to be making room for that. If you guys are attending, let me know down in the comments and maybe we can meet up. Let me show you what's in bloom and what's in spike, and we'll jump right in. So up first, we have the Ctsm Melana Davison Foxtail crossed with the Ctsm Dark Odyssey BDL, and BDL stands for Big Dark Lip. So we have a couple of very burgundy solid blooms. These are very, very pretty. I was really happy to see these open up. I'll say that when they were in bud, they had some patterning on the outside of the petals, which didn't make its way to the inside of the petals. But this was a very waxy, beautiful Ctsm flower. I was very happy to see this open up. And this one is not fragrant whatsoever. This time around, I found that in the first time you bloom them, that you may not have a fragrance, but it may come around the second time. So we'll see what happens as this continues to grow and bloom under my care. Now, it's been really hot, so the flowers didn't last very long, about a week, but these were very beautiful nonetheless. And let me show you some close-ups, and you could sort of see the patterning on some of the petals, as you can see through the light. So this was beautiful. Next up is the Monnierara Millennium Magic Witchcraft. So this orchid was in bloom for me last October. I repotted it back in January since it was pushing out a new growth. I cut off all of the old roots, and then that massive bulb grew for me in the last 6 months. I'm happy to report that this orchid had 19 buds on it. Last year, I only had 5 buds, so we made significant progress. Now, with that being said, 8 of those buds blasted, and I think they blasted because I had it sitting on my grow shelves, and the spike was resting on top of the grow shelves itself, and it gets a little bit warm, so I think it blasted because of that. The flowers are very pretty. They look black in some photos, but they're actually an extremely dark purple or burgundy. They smell like a little bit like licorice, sort of like anise. It's sort of like a cologne, like a peppery cologne. So they're very pleasant. Now, what I find interesting with this witchcraft this time around is that it has like a little bit of a growth coming through on the bulb. So we'll see what happens with that. Overall, I really like this orchid. I find that it's just so rewarding and easy to grow, and it's extremely vigorous. And I hope that the next time I grow this orchid, I'll be able to see the full 19 or 20 flowers, maybe even more. So I'm hoping also another spike pushes out this year. Next up, we have a no ID on Oncidium, possible ID Wilsonara Golden Afternoon Rich Yellow. So I've had this orchid since 2016. This was gifted to me by my mom along with a Shari baby. So this is one of the very first Oncidiums that I've ever grown. I really like this one because it's got a very, very bright, cheery looking flower. When the orchid opens up, the lip opens up yellow and then it fades to white. It's slightly fragrant, very, very slight. I'd say that it's a very floral type of fragrance, but not super noticeable until you get closer. But I really like this one because it's just so cheery and I've had it for so long and it's survived under my care when I didn't know how to take care of these orchids. But I really like this one. Keeping up on the theme of yellow, my Oncidium Twinkle Oro is back in bloom with one spike, and it's got these beautiful little dainty flowers. They smell like vanilla, and I really like them. Last year, this orchid had 14 spikes, so it was a very beautiful show. This is the very first spike to bloom. However, I'm starting to notice a couple more spikes coming through and growths in the back and all around this orchid. So I think in about 2 or 3 months, I'll have a much nicer show in the fall. So I really look forward to that one. Next up is the Vanda Vietnamica. I really got to switch out that tag since I got the incorrect ID. But this is the third time that this orchid blooms for me. This has just very unusual looking flowers and I love it. It's growing very well semi-hydroponically. And this one doesn't have a fragrance, unfortunately. I've heard reports of others having fragrance, but not this one, sadly, but still very cute. Next up is one of my favorite Cattleya orchids. So this one is the BLC Waianae Leopard Ching. And this orchid is a standard size Cattleya with bronze flowers, spotted petals, and a very pink velvet lip. What I love most about this orchid is, believe it or not, its fragrance. So this orchid smells very floral. However, it also has a spicy note. I'd say that it smells flowery with hints of gingerbread cookies. It is so wonderful and beautiful, and I'm just so proud to rebloom this one. So when I got it last year, it already came in bud and it bloomed the same time. However, as in my care, it's pushed out two new growths. It's at the point that it's sort of pushing out of the pot, so I'll need to repot this as soon as possible. Now, it's full of roots. However, when I first repotted it, it really sulked and it did not push roots out for a while. I'd say that this is typical for bifoliate Cattleya types, but it finally pulled through over the winter and started working on those new growths, each sequentially larger than the next. So I'm very, very happy with this one. Next up, we've got the Miltonia Kismet Kind Kai. And I got this orchid last year as a seedling. It was still in the original plug, and now it is blooming size. So I'm really happy to see this one for the first time. It's given me 5 different spikes. Unfortunately, a few of the buds blasted. So you could see sort of a few of the buds on top there have dried out. However, I'm very happy with how it's looking so far, just given that it's the first time it blooms for me and it's given me so many different spikes. Now, I repotted this less than a year after putting it in a clay pot and it was full of roots. So I recently transitioned it to semi-hydroponics. Some of the growths came out a little wonky and I believe it's because I wasn't able to keep up with the watering when it was in its clay pot. but these blooms are absolutely gorgeous. They're a bright yellow with sort of like a brown burgundy spotting with a lip that is white and pink. And now it's got some fragrance to it. Very slight, and I'd say as a first-time bloomer, I'm not judging it for that because we know that that can change over time in subsequent blooms, but it smells a little bit grassy. So it's very, very slight, but I'm curious to see how it smells in the future. But this is absolutely gorgeous and very vigorous, and I am very much enjoying this one. Up next, we've got Dendrobium Popeye, and I am so happy to bloom this one as well because I got it a full year ago and it's taken some time to adapt to my care, but it's been worth it. I've got just 3 blooms this time. However, I am a little bit terrified for this one because although it looks pretty compact, I've seen photos of this orchid, and I have a friend with this orchid with canes that are really, really tall. So it's working on a new growth there, and I am wondering if that's going to get to be a much larger orchid. Now, in this pot, we've got actually 2 plants. So when I got this from Carmela Orchids, they stuffed it with 2 different orchids. I may separate them out, but otherwise it's doing quite well under lights, and I'm happy to see these blooms. No noticeable fragrance yet, but these are very pretty. Next, we have a rebloom of my No ID Phalaenopsis. So this was my very, very first orchid, and when the first flush of blooms finished, this pushed out a secondary spike. So it's been in bloom since pretty much December. So I'm very happy with the arrangement of these blooms. They're white and pink, and they're just so, so pretty, and I sort of have them cascading down a bit. But I'm very, very happy with this orchid. 7 years in my care, and it's still kicking and doing really well. Up last, we've got the Dendrobium Pink Natacha. And this is the second time that this orchid blooms for me. I'm not sure if this is an actual registered cross since I haven't been able to find anything on this orchid name registered. However, this orchid is very purple and very, very pretty. It came in a bush of 4 different plants, so I actually separated it out. I kept one and I gave 3 different plants away to my friends. I like the bloom on this one. I'll say that this time around it opened up a little bit wonky, but it's a very pretty, very bright, sort of dark purple, dark pink sort of color, and I look forward to seeing more blooms in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more orchid content on how I grow in my apartment here in New York City. If you guys are going to the Tamiami Orchid Festival, let me know down in the comments below, and also let me know which of the orchids was your favorite. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.